Welcome back, everybody, to the Tennessee Titans franchise here on Madden 23. Today we've got a very fun episode in store as we have made it to the 2026 NFL Draft. Another opportunity for us to add some young talent to the organization and potentially get us some guys who can hopefully contribute to championship football going forward. I think the Titans have had a pretty good offseason so far. We've made strong additions on both sides of the ball, adding guys like Garrett Wilson, Ed Oliver, and others. So I think we're in a good spot here going into the draft, but there's no reason to think we can't make this team even better as we gear up for another chase for a championship. We don't have anywhere near as much draft capital as we've had over the last few seasons, but still enough over this year and next year to make moves if necessary. Last episode was the draft preview. We went over the entire class, talked about all of the notable prospects. So in case you missed that episode, it is in the series playlist where any other episode of the series you may have missed will be. This is a really talented draft class. Even though there aren't really any really good quarterbacks at the top, I still think the rest of the draft is really good. There's a ton of talent at offensive tackle, cornerback, edge rusher, and of course, Ohio State running back Mookie Davis is the big wild card. It's not so much about his talent, but more so the positional value of running back and ultimately where he ends up being drafted and how early somebody takes a shot on him. So I think it's a really fun group and a lot of guys who will be able to contribute early on. As we take a look at these mock drafts, the Texans are projected to pick Melly Golden, the cornerback out of Cincinnati, with the number 1 pick. Golden is projected as the top prospect in this year's draft. There are a bunch of really good corners this year, and you don't normally see corners going number 1. But Melly Golden, if there's anyone who's going to be the exception, you'd think it would be him. Some other surprises here include Mookie Davis not being the first running back off the board. The only quarterback in round 1 being Jay Jordan, going to the Packers of all teams, who don't really need a QB. And they had the Titans selecting Ayo Oguga, the corner out of Alabama, a pick that I think would make a lot of sense for Tennessee as they look to potentially get younger within the secondary. So before we get started, I have a couple small orders of business to go through. First things first, if you would like to download the draft classes, they are available on PS5. If you search in my PSN, you will find the draft classes for all 4 drafts of the series. I've had a lot of questions about the draft classes for my Knicks series in NBA 2K23. Unfortunately, those are not currently on the draft class vault. I have tried to upload them, and the game just will not let me. I don't know why, but it doesn't work. Luckily, it works for Madden, so again, if you're on PS5 and you want to give them a shot, I highly encourage it. It's a very fun group of players. My second order of business has to do with Madden 24. Of course, as we know, the game will be coming out in a little bit over a month, and I have kicked off the process of deciding which team we will use for Madden 24. In my Discord server, the link is in the description, I've announced the 12 teams I'm considering with a short paragraph or two as to why I think they'd be a fun series. If you're not in my Discord and you would like to see which teams I am considering this year, make sure to join the server. The link is in the description. You can make players and you can do other fun stuff in there as well. So let's get this started. The NFL draft is now on the clock. The Houston Texans have the number 1 pick. The Texans had the number 1 pick last year and they traded back, a move that I think in hindsight they kind of regret because the player who went number 1, quarterback Justin Tucker, had a phenomenal rookie season and the Texans don't appear to be set at QB. Unfortunately for them this year, there isn't a quarterback in this draft, and that also means there isn't really anybody looking to move up. So let's see who the Texans will now select here at number 1. With the first pick in the 2026 NFL Draft, the Houston Texans select Melly Golden, cornerback out of Cincinnati. The Texans end up going chalk, and I think this is about as good of a pick as they could make. Melly Golden is a phenomenal prospect. He's going to come in as an 84 overall, I believe the highest drafted player in this series ever. Melly Golden is the total package at the cornerback position. He's big, he's athletic, good ball skills, good coverage, good run support, good everything. With the second pick, the Vikings select Ronchavius Anderson, tackle out of Ohio State. Anderson is a really fun story. He started off as a walk-on with the Buckeyes. He was a backup before winning the left tackle job as a junior, and he has not looked back. He's been arguably the best offensive lineman in the country over the last 2 seasons as a big piece on Ohio State's back-to-back national championship run. With the third pick, we've got the Philadelphia Eagles now on the clock. and they will end up selecting cornerback Kamani Smith-Gardner out of Troy. I would say this is the first surprising pick of the day. Smith-Gardner is the highest underclassman to be drafted in this series so far. He is 23 years old, which is old for a junior. But still, Smith-Gardner's been a phenomenal player with Troy over the last few years. I'm a little bit surprised he went this high, but I get it. He's a superbly talented cornerback prospect. So that'll bring up the Seattle Seahawks with the 4th overall pick, and they select D'Jarius Roberson, offensive tackle out of Georgia. Going into the draft, I don't think the Seahawks could have really expected Roberson to fall to 4. He seemed like the obvious pick for Philadelphia at 3, but they decided to pass on him to Seattle's benefit. Roberson was the number 1 overall recruit in his high school class. He's been a 4-year starter with Georgia, and he has been a rock for them at left tackle. The Pittsburgh Steelers, with the 5th pick, select Okori Chibuke, pass rusher from Alabama. So going through the year, Chibuke was a projected top 5 pick, but as we entered the offseason, it looked like he'd be more of a mid-first rounder. I think that was smoke from the Steelers, who wanted to make sure nobody above them would select him, and for good reason. He's a 79 overall. The Miami Dolphins now with the 6th pick in the draft. They've got a good young quarterback with Kareem Kamara now, and they will give him some protection with Julian Maine, the right tackle out of Illinois. The Dolphins drafted Kareem Kamara in the 2nd round last year, and once he became the starter, he was really good, and he has superstar X Factor, so you've got to build around him well. They've got weapons. Now they're getting a big-time lineman. That'll bring up the Carolina Panthers, and they select Oswald Wiggled, offensive tackle out of Georgia Tech, another very good offensive line prospect. Here in the top 7 picks, we have already had 4 offensive tackles go off the board, which is not a surprise. This is a very top-heavy offensive tackle class. We should still see some more coming off the board within the next 10 or so picks, but the first batch of tackles are now gone before even the 8th pick. The Washington Commanders select Mookie Davis, running back out of Ohio State. So Mookie Davis is an 82 overall. He is as good as advertised. He averaged over 8 yards a carry last year. He's been a 4-year starter with the Ohio State Buckeyes and has been arguably the best player on their team over the last 2 years, which, of course, they won championships both years, largely in part to Mookie Davis, who I voted for first place for the Heisman this past season. With the 9th pick, the New Orleans Saints select Elijah Fox, defensive back out of Duke. The Saints could have been in play for a quarterback here, but with none worthy of being selected yet, they will go in the secondary with Elijah Fox, who's a 77 overall. He's an intriguing player with some upside, although I am a little bit surprised he ended up going in the top 10, but he is very clearly the highest projected safety in the class. With the 10th pick, the Denver Broncos select Dakari Bonds, offensive tackle out of Miami. So the Russell Wilson era in Denver is over. They let him go. If you remember, 2 years ago, they drafted DeAndre Smith, a QB out of Mississippi State, in the 1st round. Smith will now finally get the opportunity to start, but he's going to need some guys in front to block for him, and Dakari Bonds can do just that. Shante Cooks, cornerback out of Notre Dame, goes to the Indianapolis Colts. So now we've already got 2 corners joining our division, with first Melly Golden and now Shante Cooks. He's a versatile player who can play outside and in the slot. I think the Colts see a lot of Kenny Moore with him, but he could potentially be even better. We've got our first trade of the day here with the 12th pick, as the New England Patriots will be moving up 5 spots. Could this be for a QB, particularly Yahya Marshall out of Texas Tech? I doubt it. Mac Jones is coming off a good season. So they're going to trade up for Jake Trotter, offensive tackle out of USC. He only has normal development, but he is a 78 overall. He was arguably the best offensive lineman in the country last year, helping lead USC to a college football playoff appearance and first-round win. Trotter has been a steady rock for them at right tackle, and this feels like a New England Patriots pick. We know they love to build the trenches. That'll bring up the New York Football Jets, and they select Derek Thompson, cornerback out of Florida State. Thompson is a 4-year starter who's been productive every season with the Seminoles, and I think that has very much earned him a top half of the first-round selection. The Jets are going to add another piece to the secondary to complement Sauce Gardner and DJ Reed. So Thompson is off the board here to the Jets. We've already had 4 corners selected. Here's a 5th. Leonidas Mitchell out of Nebraska is off the board to the Atlanta Falcons with the very next pick. So of the first 14 picks, we've had 5 corners and 6 offensive tackles. This really should not be much of a surprise. We knew these positions were going to come off the board early and often. That is exactly how it has ended up playing out up to this point. Leonidas Mitchell, again, only his normal dev, but he looks like a very solid prospect. Xavier Riedel, a guard out of Georgia, is off the board to the Bears. Riedel was a player we were targeting with our first-round pick at number 30 overall, so I'm a little bit surprised that he's already off the board this early. I thought the earliest we would see him go is within the 20s, but Riedel's a really good player nonetheless. I don't think it's a bad pick for the Bears. I was just hoping he would fall to 30, but it does not look like it is going to happen. So the Bears add some more protection for Justin Fields, as with the 16th pick, we've got another trade. The New York Giants are moving up 9 spots with the Arizona Cardinals. Could this be for a quarterback? Again, I don't really think so. Tua Tagovailoa was pretty good last year. He won a playoff game. And the Giants end up selecting Frederick Swango out of LSU. Arguably the best edge rushing prospect in this year's draft. Swango's a good run defender. He's a good pass rusher as well. And as we've made it through 16 picks, so far every selection has been either an offensive lineman, an edge rusher, or a defensive back, with Mookie Davis being the exception. The Cleveland Browns will change the trend as they go with Alex Savage III, linebacker out of Michigan. He's big, he's athletic, he's good in the run game, pretty solid in coverage. I think his size and positional flexibility will be a really fun pairing with Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah inside the Cleveland defense, as the Michigan man is now jumping ship to Ohio with the Browns. Akinfenwa is off the board to the Baltimore Ravens. Akinfenwa was one of the top pass rushers in his high school class, never really developed at Georgia into the player that scouts had hoped for, but he is still a ridiculous freak athlete, and if there's any team in the NFL who's going to develop him, it's going to be the Baltimore Ravens, a team who has so much experience and success with developing raw and athletic pass rushers. Akinfenwa is next on the list to potentially become a star within their defense. With the 19th pick, the Los Angeles Rams are back on the clock. They've only had one first-rounder in the last decade, and they select Ayo Oguga, cornerback out of Alabama. He was mocked to go with the 30th pick to the Titans, and he's the guy we would have picked had he fallen there. Again, I'm not surprised to see him go, and for good reason. He's a 78 overall, but I did not think he would go this soon. Nonetheless, it is a good pick for the Rams. I just happen to be a little salty. So this is what the board looks like with 10 picks to go before our selection. No receivers have been picked yet. Cedric Cabral, the pass rusher out of Auburn, is surprisingly still on the board. And of course, we have not had any quarterbacks taken yet. I assume there's not going to be a quarterback here to the Lions as they select Cedric Cabral out of Auburn. Cabral was the best defensive player in the country this past season. He was a disruptive force on the Auburn defensive line, but he was a little bit disappointing in the playoff. He wasn't necessarily bad, but he didn't take over games. His slip reminds me of Adrian Moore, the pass rusher from Oklahoma last year, who again was arguably the best defensive player in the country. Now, Moore did perform really well in the playoff, but both Moore and Cabral only ended up with normal development. Cletus Buxton out of North Carolina goes to the Buccaneers. He's an intriguing linebacker who I think is going to be used more as an off-the-ball guy. I think he's a good run defender. He's a good athlete. My only question is really his launch speed. Will he be able to match up with running backs and super fast tight ends like Kyle Pitts and Darren Waller? Orlando Slaughter, tight end out of Michigan State, goes to the Chargers. Welcome to the slaughterhouse, everybody, as we've got another weapon for Justin Herbert. Slaughter had a great season at Michigan State with quarterback Jay Jordan, who should hear his name called within the next 30 picks or so. The Las Vegas Raiders select Raymond Leak, linebacker out of South Carolina. Leak was one of the best defensive players in the country this year, and the Raiders are going to add another piece to build their defense around. Their offense appears to be set with Justin Tucker, who they drafted number 1 last year, who of course had a phenomenal rookie season for the Raiders, and now adding Raymond Leak should be a nice addition to the defense. He's more of an off-the-ball linebacker with his size, athleticism, and his overall ability as a run defender and in coverage. That'll bring up the Buffalo Bills, but they're moving this pick to Seattle. Could this be the quarterback pick? Seattle does have Jackson Kayuma, who's a decent young quarterback, but I could see them going for a new one. The Bills will be getting 2 seconds, while Seattle adds offensive tackle Xavier Merville, and they will select offensive tackle Jalen Prater out of Syracuse. So rather than replacing Jackson Kayuma, they're going to add some guys to block for him. Xavier Merville was a first-rounder 3 years ago by the Bills. He's had a hard time staying on the field. He will likely compete for the starting right tackle gig with Jalen Prater, who they've just drafted here out of Syracuse. The Cardinals go with Boaz Hoffman, linebacker out of Virginia. Hoffman's an intriguing young pass rusher. I'm curious to see how the Cardinals utilize him. He's a little bit raw, but they have developed Jermaine Hicks, a linebacker they drafted a few years ago, into a really good player. Could they do the same with Hoffman? Cheetah Abdelaney, cornerback out of USC, is off the board of the Cincinnati Bengals. He lives up to his name. He is very, very fast for his size. He's a little bit raw in coverage, though. His technique is rather poor, but I think he's got the size, length, and athleticism to be a good player at the next level, and he might have to start right away. The Bengals' cornerback room is pretty weak. So we've got another trade here. The New Orleans Saints are moving up 13 spots with the Green Bay Packers. Could this be the quarterback spot? We still have to go through the Chiefs pick first. They select Abraham Kennedy, a guard out of Ohio State. So we've got another Buckeye off the board here in the first round, and he will be blocking for Patrick Mahomes. As for New Orleans, you'd think they would go with a quarterback here. Their penciled-in starter is Titan legend Garrett Pace. So you'd think they can upgrade here. Will we see the first quarterback off the board with the 28th pick? Yes, we do. Yaya Marshall out of Texas Tech, the Heisman Trophy winner, is a New Orleans Saint. He's a 73 overall with normal development. I know that doesn't bounce off the page, but you've got to remember, this is a weaker quarterback class. Marshall's steadily improved every year as a starter with Texas Tech, obviously winning the Heisman Trophy this year, leading them to the college football playoff, and now he will be the franchise quarterback of the New Orleans Saints. Just one pick away from the Titans as Dallas selects Woody Bunham, a guard out of Michigan. The Cowboys have always prioritized drafting good offensive linemen early. They're not afraid to draft interior guys in the first round. They've done it with Zach Martin and Travis Frederick, both of whom were Hall of Fame talents. It's bold to assume Woody Bunham will reach that level, but who knows? Anything's possible. So that'll bring up the Titans here at pick 30, and I do have some surprises on the board. We still have not had any receivers picked. Justice Everdeed and Trayon Scott are right here staring us in the face. I think they'd both be really good value picks. Most of the good offensive linemen are gone, but there is still plenty of talent in the secondary, an area where the Titans are looking to get younger. There's really two players in specific right now that I feel really comfortable with, and I think we're actually going to move back a little bit, but not too far. We will be moving back just a couple of spots here. The defending Super Bowl champion San Francisco 49ers are eyeing up a player here with pick 32, so we're going to make our move. We're going to move down 2 spots with the Niners, giving them a 7th rounder next year, while also receiving San Francisco's 4th rounder this year. Keep in mind the final pick of the 4th round, where the Niners will presumably trade up for a wide receiver. Deebo Samuel was the Super Bowl MVP last year. He ended up leaving in free agency to sign with the Colts, and their receiving core is not good. Luckily for them, there has not been a receiver picked yet. Justice Everdeed and Trayon Scott are both legitimate first-round talents. You'd presume one of them will be the pick here to the Niners, and they will, in fact, select Justice Everdeed out of Oregon. Everdeed is a total playmaker. I could really see them using him like they used Deebo Samuel. We really let this guy end up in Kyle Shanahan's offense. To be fair, it is kind of our fault because we let the Niners trade up here. But still, this is such a good pick for them. I did not want Justice Everdeed potentially ending up in Jacksonville, so I made sure to get the Niners to jump the Jags before they could select him. So the Jaguars are back on the clock now at pick 31. They can't get Justice Everdeed, so they'll go to the defensive side of the ball with Duke Hawkins, a linebacker out of Georgia. Hawkins is a jack-of-all-trades, master of none. I like his ability as a pass rusher in specific. If he does become a primary pass rusher, he will need to bulk up a little bit, but I think him, Josh Allen, and Treylon Walker could be a nice trio. So the Titans are back on the board here at pick 32. Trayon Scott, the receiver out of Auburn, is still there. We haven't had any of the defensive backs go. No new offensive linemen have been picked, and we're going to end up getting the guy who I would have wanted at pick 30. So with the 32nd pick in the 2026 NFL Draft, the Tennessee Titans select Josh Parks, cornerback out of TCU. So Parks will be the final selection here in the first round. He really checks off all the boxes for me at corner. When we watched TCU during the college football playoff this year, Josh Parks really impressed me. The other player I was comfortable with in this range was Davis Slater, another guy who was really good during the playoff with Washington, but I like Parks' positional flexibility a little bit more as he comes in with hidden development. 6'2", 207 pounds. I think he can play on the outside and in the slot, which will be necessary because he probably will play a lot inside as a rookie. He performed very well in the Big 12 championship with an interception here. We watched that game. We obviously watched TCU during the playoffs and their Cinderella run to the Final Four, in which this pick six by Josh Parks against Texas Tech and quarterback Yahya Marshall, who was just drafted by New Orleans. If not for this play, TCU might not end up winning this game. Along with his ball skills, Parks is very solid in coverage overall. He uses his tall frame and his long wingspan to help with his physicality. If he is close enough to the receiver, chances are he's going to jar the ball out because he's got super long arms. His technique could obviously use some work, and that makes sense. He is a 23-year-old rookie, but he's got some good veterans like Caleb Farley, Chidobe Awuzie, and Cardell Simpson to help learn from. Parks has 10 interceptions within the last 2 seasons and 30 pass deflections. He has a knack for the ball, and he really improved in run support this year as well with 10 tackles for loss. As a junior, TCU mainly only had him as an outside corner, but this year they played him everywhere on the field, and he was really able to shine. Since we don't need outside corners for right now, he will likely play in a bunch of different spots. He's a 73 overall, and I really like his long-term role here. We're going to use him as a Swiss Army knife, likely as a rookie. Him and Amani Ward are going to be sort of our do-it-all defensive backs. So that'll wrap up the first round, a very fun start to the draft. Melly Golden goes number 1. Mookie Davis is a Washington Commander. The Saints trade up for quarterback Yahya Marshall, while our Tennessee Titans move back a couple of spots to the end of the first round to select Josh Parks, the cornerback out of TCU. That'll bring us into the second round now. Obviously, now that we're out of the first round, we're going to be moving a little bit quicker, not going over every pick in depth. Gavin Wilkin-Wilsky is the first pick to the Texans. There's Trayon Scott off the board to Minnesota. Trayon Scott's draft stock really improved during the college football playoff. He was so impressive, in my opinion. He was probably the best offensive player not on Ohio State through the duration of the playoff. I mean, this kid was so good in every game, particularly the Washington game. He single-handedly kept Auburn in that game, and he will now be catching passes from Cade Hutchinson in Minnesota. I don't really know why he slipped out of the first round. He's very good. Khalil Diop goes to the Eagles. We've got to run on safeties now, and there's another one. Marceau Rome to the Bills. The Pittsburgh Steelers are up. Could this be a quarterback destination? They will end up selecting Roddy Jolly out of Tennessee. So the Kenny Pickett era in Pittsburgh is over. They signed Russell Wilson in the offseason, who's going to be a good starter for the short term. But Russell Wilson is pushing 40 years old. He has mentored DeAndre Smith in Denver over the last 2 years. Smith will now get an opportunity to start, and Russell Wilson will now work with the physically talented quarterback out of Tennessee. Roddy Jolly only started 1 year, but he really got better as the season went along. Utavis Kojiami out of Kansas. The cornerback goes to the Dolphins. I think we could see these corners continue to fall here early into the second round. That'll bring up the Carolina Panthers now, and they select Harrison Myers, running back out of California. They want their new Christian McCaffrey, and I suppose Myers actually does have a pretty similar skill set, as they are quite similar. Azir Shakira to the Commanders. Josh St. George, the tight end out of TCU to the Packers. He ended up being like a 79 overall, I think. Giovanni Malumbe to the Broncos. Iyame Zaccheaus to the Colts. Reese Pritchett is the first defensive tackle off the board to Cleveland. Pradyuman Singh goes to the Colts. He was a guy we liked out of UTSA. Darius Edwards II, the running back out of Miami, will be drafted by the Falcons. I guess they realize Ezekiel Elliott isn't going to be good forever. And the run on running backs is on. Jayshawn Tate goes to the Bears out of Florida State. Stone Utai to the Cardinals. And then look at this. Jay Jordan out of Michigan State is the third QB off the board as expected, but to Cleveland, interestingly enough. Deshaun Watson, I guess, isn't getting any younger, so I guess it doesn't hurt to groom a potential long-term replacement behind him. Jordan's got a strong arm, and the rest of his game is pretty solid, lacking major weaknesses, although he is questionable as a runner, but his athleticism stats really are not all that bad. Terry McMichaels out of Kentucky goes to the Baltimore Ravens. Casey Aceron, another running back out of Michigan, ends up with the Rams. Parker Ashby, linebacker, goes to Detroit. Another linebacker, Justice Campbell, goes to the Bucs. Now the run on linebackers is beginning. Manuel Lumpkin goes to Philadelphia. Johnny Machado, he was supposed to go a little while ago. He ends up slipping to the Texans. Keihani Mehayalona to the Buffalo Bills, the young, raw but talented receiver out of the University of Cincinnati. Titans are getting pretty close as Jair Williamson, the tight end, goes to the Cardinals. The Bengals get linebacker Laquez Copeland. Sammy Wusus goes to the Chiefs. That's an interesting pick. If you had told me at the beginning of the season that the Chiefs would have drafted Wusus, I would have said that's the greatest receiving core of all time. Now, Wusus was a little bit disappointing this year at South Alabama, but he is still an intriguing player. He is a 69 overall in every archetype. Nice. Just 2 picks away now. That'll bring up the Green Bay Packers with the 28th pick of the second round. They go with Malachi Fultz, corner out of Kansas State. They're having a great draft. And then Santo Irving, the super athletic safety out of Texas, goes to the Steelers. So that'll bring up the Titans now. Davis Slater, the corner we almost picked in the first round, is still there. I don't know why. Maybe we dodged a bullet. A lot of corners, a lot of receivers on the board. I think those are certainly the 2 most popular positions right now. We did already just draft a corner. So we're going to keep this pick and draft a player with the 62nd pick in the 2026 NFL Draft. The Tennessee Titans select Tavares Booker, guard out of Notre Dame. As we know, the Titans' offensive line has a hard time staying healthy. Nobody on Tennessee's offensive line played more than 15 games last year, so having depth is very important. I think having Tavares Booker as the third guard and someone who can easily slide in and play is going to be very nice. He only has normal development, but I think he's very polished early on. I think he could have been a first-round pick if not for Notre Dame's college football playoff game against TCU, where he allowed 5 sacks to Roger Carter. This was surprising because Booker had only allowed 2 sacks this year and never had an entire season where he allowed 5 sacks. So other than the playoff game against TCU, Booker's been very good through his collegiate career. The extra 5 sacks won't show up on his official stat list because that playoff game was in a separate save file, but we can imagine it's there. So I think Tavares Booker is going to come in with an extra chip on his shoulder after a really bad final game with Notre Dame. He'll be a 76 overall to get things started off. So even though he only has normal development, he is very highly rated to go. He's going to be a starting caliber guard right away. We did recently extend Nate Davis and James Daniels, but chances are one of those guys gets hurt this year, and Booker will be able to replace him. Racer Fox to the Jaguars. He was the best receiver in college football this year. He's a pure slot guy. The reason why he wasn't a higher pick is he isn't all that much of an athlete. He's slow, only 84 speed, but he's a great route runner, probably the best in this class. Good hands. He just knows how to play the receiver position, and I think he's going to get a lot of PT this year in Jacksonville out of the slot. And then the Niners select Steve Stifler, corner out of Ohio State, another Buckeye off the board. 2 years ago, in Season 2 of the NCAA Next Up series, when Steve Stifler was a freshman, I don't know if you guys remember the Big Ten championship that year between Ohio State and Oregon, but Steve Stifler had literally one of the greatest defensive performances I had ever seen. He had like 10 tackles, multiple TFLs, 2 interceptions. I think he had 2 fumble forces. He was insane. He is a playmaker within the secondary. So that'll wrap up the second round. 2 more quarterbacks off the board, both of whom are going to the AFC North, while the Titans hang tight with the 30th pick in the round, and they select guard Tavares Booker out of Notre Dame. That'll bring us into the third round. Tennessee does not own a third rounder currently. We'll see if they potentially look to move up. Vasile Goujois goes to the Texans. Lorenzo Nujols to the Vikings. Dante Banks to the Eagles. Bugsy Ernst to Seattle. He's 6'7", very fun player. And then Davis Slater's finally off the board of the Steelers. He's a 71 overall. I really don't know why he slipped. He's a good player. He was really impressive during the college football playoff, just like Josh Parks. And again, if Parks was gone, Davis Slater would have been our pick in round 1. No clue why he slipped that far. Kyrese Tellington, the third to the Dolphins. That's a really fun pick. He's a super explosive receiver coming out of Akron. Colligan Booth to the Panthers. Jonathan Gonzalez to the Commanders. He's a talented receiver. The offensive lineman bottom goes to the Saints. Auden Green to the Broncos. He had a very good college football playoff with Ohio State. Really rose his stock. Levine Adamson, quarterback out of Kentucky to the Colts. That's a little bit of a surprise. I didn't think the Colts would pick a quarterback on day 2 here. Tyrese Kalen to New England. That's a very good pick. Thomas Fairbanks to the Jets. Joelio Griffin, another Ohio State Buckeye, to the Falcons. Cameron Jones to the Bears. Minnesota gets Carson Treason, the guard out of Georgia. Ashton Aluko to New England. Love this fit. So Aluko's a 79 overall. He is really, really good. The Patriots had Robert Woods in the slot last year. Robert Woods was really good, but he ended up retiring. They need a new slot guy, and that could be where Ashton Aluko pencils right in. Him and Bryson Smith are going to be a very nice receiving duo. Marco Mazzilio to the Ravens. Dante Tillman to the Rams. Couple of tight ends off the board. Steve Redfield-Kent, he's a utility skill position player. Ends up with Detroit. I'm excited to see how the Lions are able to use him. The Bucs get Dylan Weddle, another tight end out of Ole Miss. Carlton Norway goes to the Chargers. Juju Jumanji to the Raiders. Derek Lamoons to the Bills. Madden Byrne to the Giants. Xavier Apple-Benz to the Bengals. I don't really think they needed a receiver, but that's fine. Henrik Vassbinder to the Chiefs. Pooh Trevins Jr. to the Packers. Another really good pick for Green Bay. They're killing it here. Kai Suggs Gardner, quarterback out of Washington, to the Dallas Cowboys. His brother, Kamani Smith Gardner, was the 3rd overall pick to the Eagles. So now you've got one Smith Gardner with the Eagles. The other one ends up on the Cowboys. How ironic. Kai Suggs Gardner had a great season with the Huskies, leading them to the national championship. His stock really rose up this year. Going into the season, I'm not sure if he would have gotten drafted. Now he ends up in the 3rd round. Richard Erickson goes to the Buffalo Bills. The Jaguars get Landon Ashby. And the 49ers select quarterback DeAndre Jones. I would think winning a Super Bowl would make them sold enough on Trey Lance, but maybe not. So that'll wrap up the 3rd round. A lot of offensive linemen off the board. A lot of tight ends off the board. And we had a couple of quarterbacks go late with Kai Suggs Gardner and DeAndre Jones. 2 quarterbacks with playoff experience. One quarterback has performed well in the playoff. The other, not so much. So now that'll bring us into day 3. And the Titans, keep in mind, had the 2nd pick of the 4th round. Got a lot of good receivers falling. Scotty St. Anthony, Babis Simmons, guys who were not supposed to fall here. A lot of good corners as well. Harry Stewart, the star running back of TCU, is on the board. Quite a few linebackers as well. I think the Titans have a lot of good options here. I don't see them trading down. So the Houston Texans will kick things off. They go with Alohi Analu, the defensive tackle out of Miami. So that'll bring up the Titans here to start with the 2nd pick of the 4th round. And again, there's a lot of really good players still on the board. Some players who I'm surprised ended up falling. With the 98th pick of the 2026 NFL Draft, the Tennessee Titans select Dayton Randall III, linebacker out of the University of Alabama. So Randall is the selection, the underclassman who declared after his junior season. I'm a little bit surprised he declared after missing half of the season with a knee injury. There were some other linebackers I liked here. Adrian Anderson from LSU, Zayden Collier out of Kansas. But I really like the athletic tools and upside of Dayton Randall III as he comes in with hidden depth. He is a big dude, 6'6", 250 pounds, and he tested really well at the Combine. We've seen a lot of these big sideline-to-sideline linebackers go with highly invested picks in the 1st round. Guys like Devin White, Devin Bush, Isaiah Simmons, Patrick Queen, Kenneth Murray. None of those guys have lived up to their draft status, though. But I think picking a guy like Randall here in the 4th round is good value. Now, he did miss over half of the season with a partially torn MCL, so there is some medical questions, but he passed all of his physicals from teams. He passed his physical at the Combine, so I don't think there's going to be any major issues, at least as of now, with his knee. He's a 68 overall. He probably won't see the field a ton early on, but are we going to realistically pay both Asher Gonzalez and RJ Robinson big extensions in a couple years? I'm not sure. They're both very good players, but we've got a lot of guys to pay over the next few years. The Eagles go with Tom Mason, linebacker out of Iowa. Seattle gets Chris McPherson, a guard from Auburn. The Steelers go with Lute Mergnan, the offensive lineman out of Memphis. Easton Stromboli goes to the Dolphins. There's Adrian Anderson. We contemplated him with the last pick. He goes to the Panthers. Zamir Powers off the board. There's Harry Stewart to the Packers. He's a 72 with hidden development. The Packers have had such a good draft, and now they're getting multiple key pieces of the TCU offense. They drafted Josh St. George, the tight end, in the 2nd round, who again is like a 79 overall. Now they add Harry Stewart, who was a big piece of their championship team 2 years ago. This past season, he was really good as well. He's going to be a nice pairing in the backfield with Kobe Henderson and Amadeo Kalu. Zayden Collier, the other linebacker we looked at, is off the board. He goes to the Denver Broncos. Jameer Kafili, that's a good pick to the New York Jets. Talented receiver. He's a little bit slow, but he's a good player. Jaden Lewis, wide receiver, tight end hybrid, is off the board to the Atlanta Falcons. There's Vance Maximum, one of the better pure pocket passers in the class. He goes to the Chicago Bears. He'll back up Justin Fields. Zeph McConnell to New England. He's quite similar to some of their other picks over recent years. Jaden Douglas, the Maryland kid, stays in Maryland with the Baltimore Ravens. Mickey Stoll, corner out of Baylor. He's a good player going to Detroit. And then JoJo Adiamola from TCU, also a good player going to the Bucks. He'll be teaming up with his former college teammate, Sterling Yorkshire. Here's Marquise Harris going to the Los Angeles Chargers, the quarterback out of Cal. Harris had an unlikely surge to becoming the starting quarterback at Cal, but he has been one of the most accurate passers in the country over the last 2 years. The problem is he lacks physical upside. He doesn't have the super strong arm, and he is slow as a rock in the pocket, but he can throw the football. Toomey Adelaide goes to the Raiders, Luke Harrell to the Bills, Orange Green Red to the Giants, Kaysen Darwin to the Bengals, Carlos Bellotti to the Chiefs, another weapon, Vladimir Stoholan to the Packers, Ryan Reyes to the Cowboys, that's a pretty good pick. Few selections away now. The Saints get Malloy Logan Sagaway. And then Christian Davenport, the guard out of Pitt, goes to the Jets. So that'll bring up the Titans. Still a lot of those receivers and corners like Scotty St. Anthony, Ignacio Casanova, and Buxton Yonyer all still on the board. Do the Titans go with one of the players who have been surprisingly falling, or they will go in another direction? With the 128th pick of the 2026 NFL Draft, the Tennessee Titans select Hassan Drame, safety out of Oklahoma. We got this pick earlier today in the trade down with San Francisco, and we're going to take advantage, adding a talented defensive back into the secondary with Drame. We've now drafted 2 hidden development defensive players in the 4th round. That's really good. I like the skill set of Hassan Drame. This is somebody who's a super explosive athlete. He's a little bit rough around the edges as a player, but with some development, I think he can be a starter at the next level. This is somebody who's got intriguing ball skills. He's an improving tackler and run defender. And while he is still a ways to go in his development, he has shown very solid improvement over the last few years with the Oklahoma Sooners. He did miss some time with injury this year, but when he was on the field, he was quite solid. And I'm not sure how much he's going to see the field early on with a crowded safety room of Kevin Byard, Jaquan Brisker, and Amani Ward. But long term, I really like Hassan Drame, who's a 70 overall. The coverage is a little low, the tackling is a little low, but the athleticism is really good. You can't teach speed, you can't teach explosiveness, and he has shown the work ethic and consistent improvement to where I think he will continue to progress and be a good starter in this league. So that'll wrap up round number 4. The Titans with 2 very solid selections, going with a couple of SEC defensive players, picking Alabama linebacker Dayton Randall III, and rounding out the 4th round with Oklahoma safety Hassan Drame. It's hard to find any hidden development players in the 4th round, let alone 2 of them. Let's move on to the 5th round. The Titans also have 2 picks in this round as well. Derico Callaway to the Texans. That's a good pick. He's going to play a lot as a rookie. Ben Bones, the running back out of Washington, is a Minnesota Viking. He was great in the playoff. Tyshawn Bankston to the Eagles, the running back out of Oklahoma. He's a good player. Corbin Dayton, center out of USC, had a great year. He ends up going to the Pittsburgh Steelers here early in the 5th round. Moving a little bit forward now, Joseph Griffin from Georgia's off the board. Carly Garlandshire to the Broncos. Yaounde Moutier, we liked him a lot. He ends up with the Colts. Kervin Armstrong, good pick to Cleveland, the pass rusher out of Oregon. Jackson Pertzkin to Seattle. He's a talented player. Ant Werver, key starter with TCU. He's off the board to the Minnesota Vikings. Only a few picks away now. Osmond Webb to Detroit. Justin Cleming-Folo to the Bucks. William Guile to the Chargers. And Cassius Gobo out of the Ohio State goes to the Raiders. So the Titans are back on the board. Scotty St. Anthony, Ignacio Casanova, and Buxton Young are all still there. When are these guys going to go? The Titans have 2 of the next 6 picks. So we'll see what they end up targeting here in the later portion of the 5th round. They're going to hold on here to this selection. With the 24th pick in the 5th round, the Tennessee Titans select B.E. Latore, nose tackle out of Kansas. You want to plug somebody into the middle of your defense who can stop the run and take away rushing lanes? This is your guy. Think your prototypical nose tackle, space-eating, hog molly beast. 6'7", 355 pounds. This is a large human being. But the reason why I really like him is not just because of his ability in the run game, but I think there's some long-term upside as a pass rusher. Now, he lacks speed. He doesn't really have great get-off or great quickness, but I do think he's got a solid array of pass rushing moves because of his brute force and strength. This is somebody who is dominant in the run game and is improving his pass rushing technique despite his lack of quickness. He's got 10 sacks over the last 2 years, 28 TFLs. His numbers show up in the box score. I know a lot of nose tackles, they don't put up big numbers, and they don't need to make an impact, but Latorre's in there making tackles, making plays in the backfield. He doesn't need quickness to make an impact. He's so strong and physical that he's able to take advantage. So the question I have with him is, will he be able to handle the physicality of an NFL offensive line? Because he wins with his physicality. He is not going to win with his get-off. So if he cannot handle the strength of NFL offensive linemen, he will not be good. But I think he's strong enough to where he will. He's only a 66 overall, but I do like the long-term prospect of adding him into the defense. And guess what? We have another pick super soon. Hernaik Liandu to the Giants out of Tight End University, Iowa. The Bengals go for Sean Perkins, LaRon Hickman to the Chiefs, Alfredo Milton to the Packers, and then John Will Christopher out of Vanderbilt goes to the Cowboys. So we're back on the board. All of these highly projected players are still here. St. Anthony, Casanova, Young, even Jelly McCluntz, the running back out of Arizona State. There's a lot of guys I like here, and because of that, we are going to move down. We're going to be trading back into the early 6th round with Carolina, moving down 9 spots and getting a 7th rounder next year. We lost our 7th rounder next year earlier today in the trade with the Niners. And Carolina, sure enough, trades up for Jelly McCluntz. That's a great pick, the running back out of Arizona State. Will Knobb to the Jags and Thor Erickson to the Niners. So that'll wrap up the 5th round. The Titans started the round with 2 picks. They ended up trading away one of them. But they did stick and pick with their first selection, going with B.E. Latorre, the nose tackle out of Kansas. So the Titans still have 2 picks to go, one in the 6th round, one in the 7th round. We'll see if they've got any more movement, whether that's making another trade down or maybe making their first trade up of the draft. Prince Parks, quarterback out of Louisville, to the Texans. Michael Henderson to Minnesota. Kenny Nanababatata to the Eagles. He's a super talented young corner out of Kansas. DeAndre Kyle, that's a great pick to the Dolphins. And so that'll bring up the Titans here, round 6, pick 7. St. Anthony, Casanova, Buxton Young, all still here. Did the Titans finally pull the trigger on one of these guys? With the 7th pick of the 6th round in the 2026 NFL Draft, the Tennessee Titans select Caleb Kerfriney, center out of LSU. So Kerfriney is the pick. He's a really polarizing player. This is somebody who I think has a ceiling to be really good. And sure enough, he will end up with hidden development. But there are a lot of red flags with him and multiple reasons as to why he slipped into the 6th round. We'll start with the medical. He took a physical days before the draft and reportedly failed it. He was supposed to go in the 4th round, but because of failing the physical, he ends up sliding to the 6th round. Along with that, he's really not all that consistent of a player. He has some really good reps in there, but he also has some really bad ones, especially in pass protection, which have led him to allowing a lot of sacks over the years. He ended off the season injured, missed a couple of games down the stretch, but I will say there is still a lot to like about him. He's a mauler in the run game. He has shown very steady improvement throughout his career when healthy as a run and pass blocker. And here in the 6th round, why not take a shot on a guy who was supposed to go a couple rounds earlier, who we know is talented? He's only a 67 overall, but with that hidden development, I think we could be looking at a really good player at the next level with Caleb Kerfriney. As for the other guys we passed on with the corners, I just don't really think it's in our best interest to go with a defensive back. And then Scotty St. Anthony, I don't think he's that bad, but I also don't think he's a 2nd round talent per se. I see why he slipped a little bit, maybe not this far. The Commanders go with Ja'Cory Smoke, a wide receiver out of San Jose State. He's a good player. I like that pick a lot for them. Antonio Crane, running back out of Texas A&M to the Saints. That's a fun pick. So is Sam Deli, the linebacker out of TCU to the Broncos. Nick DiMaggio to the Browns. Ali Magassa to the New York Jets. Let's move a little bit forward now. Kenyon Carter to the Dolphins. Blake Swash to the Ravens. That's a nice pick. Aquesto Chigalocomo, the running back out of Clemson, to the Rams. Trey Williams to the Detroit Lions. Dallas Jones, he was supposed to go quite a bit earlier. He ends up with the Los Angeles Chargers. David Odorat, wide receiver out of Duke, one of Justin Tucker's favorite targets. He ends up with the Bills. Green Bay selects quarterback Jimmy Jenkins. He will join a QB room featuring Genesis Moon and Malik Willis. Packers finally draft the quarterback they were projected to a lot earlier. Buxton Young III, cornerback out of Auburn, finally off the board of the Jaguars. I really don't know why he slipped this far. I think he's a pretty talented player who probably should have gone in the 3rd or 4th round. So the Titans stick and pick here in round 6. They get Caleb Kerfriney, the center out of LSU. Again, as we know, this team needs as much offensive line depth as possible. And so that'll bring us into the 7th round. In case you're curious about Buxton Young's rating, he's a 69 overall. He really should not have slipped this far. So now that we move into round 7, we've still got St. Anthony and Casanova, who were projected day 2 picks, still on the board. The Titans have one more pick here, the 30th selection in the 7th round. We'll see if they trade out, trade up, or if they stick. Derek Dunbar to the Texans. Jet Jackson, quarterback out of Auburn to the Vikings. He will join forces with his number 1 wide receiver, Trayon Scott, who the Vikings drafted in the 2nd round. Very fun storyline there. Scotty St. Anthony is finally off the board to Seattle. I think the reason why he slipped was because of the combine. He did not test very well, and it ends up costing him all the way to the 7th round. We'll see if he's going to be able to beat the doubt. Troy Davenport, quarterback out of Alabama, goes to the Washington Commanders. Maverick Cherokee, that's a nice pick to Minnesota, as is Zach Torres Jr. going to the Broncos. Ignacio Casanova is off the board to the Colts. His issue is not the athleticism. He's arguably the fastest player in the entire draft, but he is off the board finally to the Colts. I'm starting to notice a lot of guys who I like are going off the board, and there's only really one player who I really want at this point, so I'm going to trade up and get him. Remember that future 7th round pick we just got from Carolina? Well, we're going to use that along with our current 7th to move up 18 spots with the Cleveland Browns. So basically, we moved down 9 spots from round 5 to round 6 to get that 7th, and then we use it to move up 18 spots in the 7th round. Good business right there. So who is the player we are looking to trade up for? This is a player who I am really high on. I'm surprised he's fallen this far, and I think he'll be a great fit here. With the 12th pick in the 7th round, the Tennessee Titans, with our final draft pick of the day, select Ramir Conwell, running back out of the Ohio State University. The Titans finally draft an offensive skill position player, and this marks the fact that in every single draft of this series, we have picked a running back at some point. I really think Ramir Conwell is going to end up being a total steal. Teams will ultimately regret him falling into the 7th round. This is the type of kid you root for and you bet on. As we saw with Ohio State, they had arguably the greatest rushing offense in the history of college football, and that's largely because of the 3-headed monster they had in the backfield. That includes Mookie Davis, who got drafted in the top 10 by the Washington Commanders, Puma Whitlock, the quarterback, who's going to be a top pick one day. But what about the 3rd wheel of the operation? That was Ramir Conwell, who did not get as much love as those 2 guys, but he's just as valuable to this team. Conwell has been able to provide a lot of different things for Ohio State over the last couple of seasons. I'm not entirely sure what his role is going to be here, but I am confident he will have a role. He's an awesome special teamer. He's good in punt coverage. He's a good kick and punt returner as well, and he will have an opportunity to compete to be the main kick and punt returner here for our Titans. Conwell has a really interesting story as well. As a freshman and a sophomore, he had a limited role in the offense, getting some carries here and there, but did not have that big of a role. Then going into his junior season, he was pegged to be the number 2 back behind Mookie Davis until 2 minutes into Ohio State's first game of the year, where he tears his Achilles and he is out for the season. Ramir Conwell came back this year stronger than ever. He took the number 2 running back spot, and he did not look back, rushing for nearly 1,300 yards with 14 scores and over 7 yards a carry. Mookie Davis and Puma Whitlock got all the love, but Ramir Conwell got just as many touches as those guys did, and he was just as good. This is somebody who has dealt with a lot of adversity over his career. He never started a game in college, but he's still in a role with Ohio State. He found a way to make an impact on the field. He came back stronger than ever after that Achilles injury, and I feel like that's just the type of player who you want to bet on and root for with his winning DNA. He sat on the sidelines and watched his team win a championship without him, and then this year he was a huge part of them winning another one. Conwell passed all of his medical exams prior to the combine, so I don't think the Achilles injury should be an issue as of now. It certainly was not an issue for him last season. I'm really excited about adding Ramir Conwell to the team as we're quickly going to make it through the rest of the 7th round, and we'll take a look at the final picks of the season. Skipper Lansdale, quarterback out of Boise State, goes to the Buccaneers. That's an interesting pick for your starter with the Broncos. I'm curious to look at the undrafted players as well. There are still some really talented players on the board who I think are going to be good pros. Certainly some good college players still left, as we're only a couple picks away. Walton Duran, the wide receiver, goes to the Browns. That's a really good value pick. And so that'll wrap up round 7. The Titans move up to select Ramir Conwell, my favorite pick of the entire draft. Again, I cannot say enough good things about Ramir Conwell. I'm so excited to have him on the team. His high football character is going to be so valuable for our squad. Let's take a look at some of the notable undrafted players at quarterback. Rufus Motley, Cedric Chapman, 2 highly heralded starters at big programs, do not get drafted. A lot of good skill position players. Mason Tartle, Kyrie Freeze, Rudolph Moore, Richie Rhodes, Taquan Pugh. All of those guys are good enough to have gotten picked. A lot of good receivers ended up going undrafted as well. Jason Sanchez, the starting left tackle at TCU, is a big surprise. And then a lot of really good corners. Helix Jones, Caleb Chambers, Manson Eagle, Colin McCain. Even some of the safeties as well, guys like Musa Maraf and Issa Monaco. Overall, I feel like the draft went really well for us. The board played out pretty much how I had expected for the most part, and I feel like we took advantage. We got some good early picks with Josh Parks and Tavares Booker, and we made the most of our day 3 selections with Randall, Drame, Latore, Kerfrini, and Ramir Conwell. So let's now take a look at what to expect here for season number 5. As you guys know, Madden 24 is only a little bit more than a month away. I want to get through another full season of this series. I also want to get through the long-term sim as well. And I am actually planning on doing something a little bit different for the long-term sim, something more in-depth that's going to take more than 2 or 3 episodes. So because of that, in order to get the series done before Madden 24 comes out, we're going to have to move through Season 5 really fast. So what we're going to do, or at least what I'm going to try to do, is play 4 games an episode. I know that seems like a lot, but that's going to be the goal. I'm not entirely sure if we're going to be able to accomplish it, but I'm going to try it and see how it works. If not, then I don't really have the backup plan, so hopefully it ends up working. Next episode, we will go through the preseason and as well as our first 4 games of the regular season. Hope everybody enjoyed the episode. As you guys know, these draft episodes take a lot of hard work, but I'm always really proud of how they turn out. Make sure to leave a like and subscribe to the channel if you are new. Peace out. Tighten up.